All right, everyone, we're going to hand it over to John, who will introduce our guest speaker. Thank you for your patience.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, sir, for your patience. This is Antoine Sanfuentes, who is the managing editor for CNN, the White House and Capitol Hill coverage. He's been a veteran media person. He was, I heard from, well, I saw from Political that he was in line to be president of NBC News and had been with NBC for quite some time, and he's been gracious enough to be patient with our technical difficulties and tell our class about his job and maybe take some Q&A as well.
Hi there. I can't see the class, I can see you, but I'm delighted to be joining you today, and I thank John and Professor for having me speak to you. It's obviously a very busy time in Washington, D.C. You're right down the road. But just by way of background, you introduced me. I spent over 2 decades at NBC News, 15 years covering the White House, multiple administrations. I spent some time in the field with Ann Curry. We did lots of conflict reporting in places like Congo and Darfur. And then I came over to CNN. I've been here coming up on about 5 years, as you mentioned, covering the White House and Capitol Hill. We are in the midst of the Kavanaugh nomination story as we anticipate the FBI releasing their supplemental background check. Of course, the White House is waiting for it, and so are the members of Congress, the key members on the Judiciary Committee, and then, of course, Leader McConnell will have to then decide what to do once that report comes in. So that is who I am. If it would help, I could certainly open the room up to questions if that suits you.
Sure, that's great. My classmates may have some questions. I know Professor has some questions. Go ahead.
In your relatively fast-paced work setting, what is some technical and communicational issues you seem to run into on a day-to-day basis, and how do you tend to go about solving those?
Well, I've always found, whether we are working in-house or traveling around the world, to have multiple technological kind of backup plans. I always ask the people that I work with, especially when we go to the field, what is your plan B? Your plan B is generally your strongest solution, because plan A is predictable, but if you're going somewhere where your cell phone service is going to be spotty, do you have a satellite phone, for example? If you're going to be broadcasting using satellites, we have new, very, very sophisticated cellular technology called LiveView. Essentially, it's the equivalent of 5, 6, 10 cell phones bundled together with that bandwidth so that we can broadcast just about anywhere. We can do it domestically, and then we can get that technology that can be used overseas as well, and allows us to be portable. Today, RMK Bennett is landed in Accra, Ghana with the First Lady. You saw live images from the tarmac where she landed. That was through the use of LiveView technology, very portable, lightweight. That means you can broadcast from just about anywhere in the world.
Hi. So I have a question for you. In all of your years in developing these stories, in our business class, we have ideas that we're asked to be creative about, and we think of them and we fall in love with them, and we put them on paper. And even for us, not having multiple stories, to be concise is a challenge for some of us. How do you manage so many stories and being concise to deliver the message, but still organizing them in a way that they're easily readable?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, you mentioned the word love, which equates to passion. You have that passion for storytelling. You're telling a story, and just remember, whether you are conveying this story and communicating it with the spoken word, or you're writing it down. I have an old singer-songwriter friend in the state of Texas who says simplicity shouldn't need to be greased, and by that it means simplicity is so important in how you communicate a story. You don't want to use big words, things that complicate your sentences and exactly how you structure the thoughts that you're trying to convey. So you ask, how do we do all this? Well, a lot of the news that we deal with every single day is no different than what you look at when you wake up and you look at your phone and you wonder what happened since I've been sleeping, or what has happened since I've been at work all day, or or in a meeting for an hour. We deal with like priorities. What are the biggest news stories that everybody's talking about or will be interested in? And then we convey those stories on a deeply human level. How do you tell a story so that people will really be energized and interested in that?
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because I know for me personally, we were raised with, if the paper isn't long, it isn't valid. You know, the more academia is put into it, the more valid the argument. So thank you for that.
Well, let me add to your point. We're the exact opposite here. In broadcasting and conveying news and information is about brevity. In fact, I worked with a reporter who would literally go through his script and he would cross out words. And his sentences were very short so that he could communicate precisely exactly what he wanted to tell his audience. Great question.
Hi. Clearly, you rely on business communication skills every day at your job. Can you think of a specific example, maybe a critical moment in your career where communication skill really paid off?
Well, communication skills under perfect circumstances, you have the time to think about it, you have the time to prepare for it, then you execute it, and then hopefully you accomplish your goal. In my business, it's a high-pressure situation. So with all the preparation that we go through, we get challenged in the field. You literally you don't have time to think about it. You literally have to just act and execute based on that experience you have. So you asked me for an situation. I would point to 9/11. I was traveling with the White House and George W. Bush. We were at the school in Florida. I was with my reporter, David Gregory, at the time. And it was not a situation where I was able to really think about what I was going to do. I had to do it. News broke. We saw the second plane hit the tower in New York City. I had to get David Gregory on television because what I do is putting people on television. I was a producer at the time working in the trenches, and time is of the essence. So, preparation is important, experience is important, but working under pressure is really paramount. That's where you get tested.
Thank you so much for telling us the story.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So I've got a couple questions I want to pack into one, as I think you'll be able to answer that. Now, today, we have such various news sources and means of communication. We have social media, we have things like this with FaceTime. What challenges and opportunities do you see with modern communication? And without getting too political, at this point in time, we have news media and sources that are under attack in terms of credibility, what's real news, what's not real news. How do you deal with that and communicate effectively, whether in the news media or in business?
Well, whether you're a news media or business, you're engaged in a profession. You are in an academic environment where your students are learning how to do what they do and what they're going to learn, what they're going to do when they leave your academic environment. My journalism, my background, my experience is no different than an academic environment or a journalistic environment. We have high standards where we are here at CNN. So in terms of the job that we do, working with sources, demanding transparency, covering whether it's the White House or Capitol Hill, our job does not change. Administrations come and go, members of Congress come and go. Our profession does not change. Republicans and Democrats have criticized journalists since the beginning of this great experiment we call a democracy, and the First Amendment is what is paramount. But we don't change what we do. We still believe in verifying our sources. We trust and verify, of course. We adapt, of course, to technology. The technology is the reach. Technology is how we provide the public service. It is the connection, and technology will keep improving. It will keep getting better, but it doesn't change our profession. Fundamentally, we still have to be super good at what we do as reporters.
That's awesome. I want to turn it over to our professor, and then obviously the class probably has a question. I'll leave it to him, Professor Chicotsky.
Thank you. I'd like to just get a question in, and then I'll open it up to others. Firstly, I'm just so impressed that you've been able to stay malleable with us, and I'm very grateful that you've done that. It's hard to see. Thank you. It's hard to see the presence, but we have about 25 active working professionals. One question that I often get is how one in your particular role can maintain an energy level that is conducive for the timeline that news necessitates. I'm curious as to how fractious your sleep schedule is and whether or not you manage that and how you manage that. But more importantly, how do you communicate to your team so that the directives are clear and that as you manage downward, your subordinates and those you mentor or those who are working under you who maybe don't have the closest relationship are able to act as swiftly and as intently as you would?
It's a great question. Well, number one, my schedule adapts to the story that I cover. So if I'm overseas, I adapt to the local time, but I also have to adapt to the East Coast time because we're always broadcasting on East Coast time if it's CNN domestic, and of course we have international on the local time schedule. So there are some very long trips and very few hours to get some rest. In terms of here back at home, my day really is structured. I wake up before the president does. We have a sense of when he becomes active around 6 a.m. He tweets rather late into the night. So my team provides coverage 7 days a week with those little gaps in the middle of the night, but I really try to be up during the most critical waking moments so that we can make the proper editorial decisions, and I need to be around so that they know that they can consult me at any time. I really don't see myself as a team leader. I see myself as the team enabler. I really do try to be an activist reporter as part of my team. I try to enable and just really push their successes. The top-down approach is just too heavy-handed when you work in a journalistic environment. Really, it's a lateral situation out of pure kind of respect for the kind of work that we do, and we all try to help each other out. And you roll up your sleeves and you do the work just like everybody else. And I find that way you get a lot more success.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear how you take a perspective of facilitating and executing rather than directing and giving didactic approaches to leadership. One thing I've always been curious about is when anyone speaks to you or anyone on your team, do you have to clarify or do you presume not to clarify or choose not to clarify that everything is on the record? And if you can, for our class, explain the sensibilities or the nuances about that particular rule, that kind of role of what's stated to a journalist can end up in writing.
Well, I try to demand as often as we can, and we don't always get it, of course, that everything be on the record. I mean, ultimately, everything should be on the record. But when we work with sources, they demand to be on background because it does protect who they are and it does protect the information flow, which is critical to our profession. So, the distinction being on the record, what I just said, and as a journalist, when I speak to classrooms, and I assume I'm on the record, right? What I say is what people will hear, and they will tweet it out or do whatever they so choose, and that's fine with me. When I work with sources, or my team works with sources, there are different levels of that, of course. There's on background, which means it's reportable, but you cannot report their name. You should ideally give a sense of where they work, so you have a sense, a senior White House official, something like that. Then there's the next level would be deep background, meaning rather than saying what part of government they come from, you would say a senior government official. That way you have no sense of where they come from. And that would be very special circumstances where critical issues were at play. And then the last is off the record, meaning what we discuss shall not be reported out to the public. If we had decided to have this meeting off the record today, of course it would be between myself and you and your students, but that's not the case today.
Thank you. I want to open this to the class and allow the team to reassume control of the student-led exercise. Thank you again for facilitating us or being part of this facilitated exercise. And of course, the team knows if the students are perhaps have any level of timidity, they're going to step in.
Very good.
Does anyone else have any questions for our guest today?
You might come in down.
Yeah,
Coming on down.
He's coming down.
Okay.
He's jogging down.
Okay. Hey, first of all, thanks for being here, and thanks for the important work that you do, especially in the political climate that we're in. A lot of the rhetoric coming, especially at CNN. My question has to do with you mentioned that you were abroad in certain circumstances, and I assume there's some issues with communication in that scenario. So how do you, I guess, ingratiate yourself and earn the trust of the people that you're working with in such a short period of time?
Well, the best part about traveling with your team is you get their trust. I think that when you work in a controlled environment, it's easy to work with the team very closely, but not so closely because ultimately you're not challenged with all the kinds of things that you get challenged with when you travel overseas. Think about going to a place like Beijing, where all the street signs are not in English. Getting around Beijing is very difficult. So think about having to do your job without the control that you require to successfully execute and do a good job. When you've got the language barrier, you've got the logistics barrier, there are all kinds of things that are working against you before you can even start doing your job. So what I try to do is I try to build a team where there's a certain skill set. I look for universal skill sets. I like people who can do all kinds of things, which includes an ability to kind of understand and use technology. I will look for opportunities in controlled ways to send my various team members out so that they, like the proving ground, so they can define themselves to be tested. And then there are the much larger events which are mission critical, i.e., going to the Helsinki summit, where the president met with the leader of North Korea, where I really want my team to be on their A game. And I know by the time that we get there, they've tested in small ways throughout the year. And of course, probably the biggest test is their ability to stay awake because, you're in Asia, you're on a 12-hour or so time difference. So you're completely jet lagged, you're having to think clearly, you're having to really figure out ways to get your cat naps and stay strong and stay relevant and stay sharp. So that's important stuff for me. And then on the back end of the trip, it's also important that your team get a break. That you recognize you cannot push your team all day long and bring them back from an exhausting exercise or an exhausting trip and then push them again right away. You just can't do that. You really do have to temper how tough you push them and how important it is to reward them and allow them to get their downtime too.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for our guest? One question? Well, I'll just jump in one question and I'll step back. I have another question. In this environment, with technology being so disruptive, do you feel that newsrooms and business models that are attacked, do you feel like news now is sort of a lost leader? How do you maintain value for your viewership in the face of instant live with technology anywhere, Netflix and all these other sort of sources out there that can disrupt your industry?
Well, I think that we now live in a technological world. The technology has taken over. To borrow a phrase from the expert who said that technology was brought in to help you with the workarounds, to make your job easier. I mean, that's really what happened. And so technology applies to journalism. But let's face it, journalism today is more relevant than ever. When there's a massive tsunami in the world, let's think about what the viewer wants instantly. They want to know what happened and they want to see it. The only organizations can do that are the organizations that benefit from scale and the ability to go there as we can, and that is unique to very few news organizations who can rally a go team, get there. And let's think about the new technologies. It gives us a sense of what happened there. It used to be with natural disasters, we had to wait days and days to get a sense of what happened and wait for the usually official government helicopters to go up into the sky or figure out a way to get a macro sense of the damage. Nowadays, you send a drone up and you almost know instantly what happened there. Drones have really revolutionized what happened here from that macro sense. It's really incredible. So I see technology as very disruptive, very important to what we do in terms of that very wide open type of information that becomes available to the citizen journalist, to the professional journalist. But in the end, we still need these very relevant and important institutional organizations like CNN, like the other broadcast networks, like the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. And this is really, our profession has been, I believe, reinvigorated. Granted, there's a lot of talk about politics and covering the White House and covering this president. But beyond that, moving into this highly technical period that we have now, whether it's the watch on the wrist that delivers the information that you need, or whether you're watching what we do on your cell phone or a big flat screen on your wall. You're probably older if you're doing that. But that to me is part of the reach to the public at large that we are trying to serve.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, so for the sake of your time and ours, we'll go ahead and thank you so much for coming and for
Thank you, Antoine. Thank you
Well,
so
it's
much.
my pleasure. I wish everyone well. I understand that this is a kind of a transition phase in your educational development and your working professionals trying to enrich yourselves. So I wish all of you the best of luck, and it's really my pleasure to be speaking to you tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you.